Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine this scenario. You have a starting quarterback who is playing at a pretty decent level throughout the season. The starting quarterback gets injured midway through the year, and now the backup comes in. The backup winds up playing at a pretty decent level as well, with the stats being very similar to those of the starting quarterback. And combined with how good you were with the starter and the backup, you're now in the postseason. And better yet, the guy that you started the season with is able to return for the playoffs, even though it's been quite a while since he stepped onto the field. If I present the situation to you like that, who would you play in your playoff game? Would you ride the hot hand with the backup, or would you go back to your starting quarterback, who won the starting job for a reason, but is admittedly rusty and hasn't stepped foot on the field in over a month? Well, as interesting and as thought-provoking as this hypothetical scenario is, in 2005, it was not a hypothetical at all. Because in 2005, Jacksonville Jaguars head coach Jack del Rio had to make this tough call. And in the end, the decision that he wound up making turned out to be the wrong one. It backfired in almost spectacular fashion. And it's a decision that more than a decade and a half later, still has Jaguars fans, including myself, questioning Del Rio's controversial move. And this is the story behind the craziest quarterback controversy in the history of the wildcard round. Before I talk about the controversy and the decision in question, we need some context to understand how the team was doing, who the starting quarterback was, why he got replaced, and how the backup did in his role. Entering the 2005 season, there were expectations that the Jacksonville Jaguars would be a pretty good team. They went 9-7 the year before, and looked like they were steadily improving under the guidance of head coach Jack del Rio, who was entering his third season with the team. And through the first 11 weeks of the 2005 season, they were looking poised to not only have a good season, but to possibly make it to the playoffs for the first time since 1999, snapping a 5-year drought. Through 11 weeks, the Jaguars were 7-3, and had won 3 straight games, picking a great time to play some of the best football of the year. The Jaguars had a stout defense that only allowed 170 points through 10 games, which was the 4th best total in the AFC and was the 6th best total in all of football. They had a ground game that was pretty solid, led by one of the best fullbacks in the league in Greg Jones, and one of the most underrated running backs in the history of the NFL in Fred Taylor. But for the purposes of our story, the guy we're focused on is the man under center. And that man happens to be a third-year quarterback out of Marshall by the name of Byron Leftwich. By no means was Leftwich great, although he did have some great performances, like a Week 11 game against the Tennessee Titans, where in a 31-28 victory, he threw for 258 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. However, he was doing enough to get the job done. He wasn't flashy, but he wasn't going to kill you with a big mistake. Through the first 10 games of the season, Leftwich had completed just under 58% of his passes, throwing 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions alongside 2,100 yards. If these numbers were extrapolated over the course of a full 16-game season, just to give you an idea of how Leftwich compared to his peers that year, he would have finished the year 4th in touchdown passes, 12th in passing yards, and 24th in completion percentage. In other words, even though Leftwich only completed 60% of his passes in 2 of his 10 games, he was a pretty serviceable quarterback who was commanding the ship as the Jaguars were in position for a wildcard spot. And then, the Cardinals game happened. November 27, 2005. It's Week 12 of the NFL season, and the Jaguars, for the first time in franchise history, are traveling to take on the Arizona Cardinals. The good news for the Jags was that they were able to keep their hold on one of the wildcard spots, as they prevailed by a final score of 24-17. The Jags played well, never trailing or even tying outside of 0-0 at any point in the game, and they forced 2 turnovers while never turning it over themselves, and while converting on more than 50% of their third down attempts. It was a good win to get the Jags to 8-3, giving them the 4th best record in football. However, the bad news was that early in the first quarter, Leftwich got hit by Adrian Wilson and broke his right ankle. He had to be carted off the field and would be ruled out for an extended period of time. That meant that the Jaguars would have to finish the season with David Garrard under center. Now, Garrard had been with the Jaguars since 2002. It even started a few games over the previous 3 seasons when necessary. But this was the first time that Garrard was going to be the team's starter for an extended period of time. And with him guiding the team, the Jaguars were not only winning games, but were doing so with their most explosive offensive production of the season. The Jaguars went 4-1 with Garrard under center, and in the final 2 weeks, put up 78 points, scoring 38 against the Texans and 40 against the Titans. And it wasn't as though the Jags were winning games in spite of Garrard's production. In fact, his numbers were fairly similar, if not better, than those of Byron Leftwich. In his 5 starts, compared to Byron Leftwich's 11 starts, Garrard had a higher completion percentage, a better touchdown to interception ratio, fewer sacks per game, which makes some sense as Garrard had what Leftwich didn't with regards to mobility, more passing yards per game, fewer lost fumbles per game, and more rushing yards per game. Now, when I say these numbers, with the obvious exception of rushing yards because of their differing styles, keep in mind that there was not a huge gap. It was awfully close. For example, Garrard's completion percentage was less than 3 points higher than Leftwich's, and Garrard averaged 7 passing yards per game more than Leftwich. Not a whole lot. Still, Garrard did his job incredibly well. When your backup quarterback comes in and puts up comparable, if not better numbers than the starter, and guides your team to a 4-1 record in that stretch, with a lone loss being against the Indianapolis Colts, who entered that game with a 12-0 record, that's pretty good. And now, with the playoffs looming and Byron Leftwich healing, Jack del Rio had quite the decision to make with regards to who was going to be his quarterback. Before I talk about what Jack del Rio wound up doing for the wildcard round, I should note that del Rio made quite the questionable decision in Week 17 when the Jaguars played the Titans. The Jaguars had absolutely nothing whatsoever to play for. They were locked into the number 5 seed. And Leftwich theoretically could have played in this game. He was good to go and was the number 3 quarterback. However, as the Jaguars won 40-13, Leftwich never played, as David Garrard and Quinn Gray split the snaps. Theoretically, Jack del Rio could have put Leftwich into the game to at least give him some game action and some live experience to get back into somewhat of a rhythm and not have him be completely rusty. But he decided not to do that, as del Rio later said that he didn't want to risk Leftwich getting hurt anymore. And then when it came time for Jack del Rio to announce who his starting quarterback was going to be, he announced that it was going to be Byron Leftwich, and not David Garrard, who would be starting in wildcard weekend against the 2-time defending Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. This was despite the fact that Garrard had the hot hand, was putting up similar and comparable, if not slightly better per game numbers than Leftwich was, and was despite the fact that Leftwich had not seen the field since November 27th, which was more than 40 days ago. It was a highly questionable decision that left some Jags fans praising del Rio and left others scratching their heads. You were either Team Leftwich or Team Garrard at this point, and for what it's worth, my 9-year-old self was on Team Garrard, and thought Jack del Rio was making a mistake by throwing Leftwich into the Wolves against a red-hot Patriots team 40 days after a major injury with no live action. And with that, we head to Foxborough. It's January 7, 2006, and the Jaguars and Patriots are squaring off for a spot in the divisional round. Not many people were giving the Jaguars much of a chance in this one. You had a team with little playoff experience playing in New England, where the Jaguars had never won before, and playing against the 2-time defending champions. If the Jaguars were going to win, they were going to have to keep pace with New England and their offense that was a top 10 offense in the league. And for everyone watching, the big storyline and thing to watch was simple. How would Byron Leftwich, who controversially was named the starter, perform in not just his first game back, but in the biggest game of his entire career? The answer was quite clear. This was going to be a train wreck.
Del Rio had the choice of going with the hot guy, Garrard, who did a real nice job, or going back to his original starter.
And I think that, that Jack del Rio has to feel that Byron Leftwich is his guy. That's his quarterback. And when he gets well, you have to play him. How well he is tonight, I'm not sure.
From the very first drive, you could just tell that something with Leftwich was off. His very first pass was a poorly thrown screen to Jimmy Smith, which, while caught, resulted in no gain. The second pass on third down was well short of the sticks and fell incomplete. The Jaguars went 3 and out. Not an ideal start. Things do not get much better on the second drive, as the Jaguars once again go 3 and out. And on drive number 3, it's still a disaster. On the first play of drive number 3, I don't even know what to call this, but I'm pretty sure that's not how the snap exchange between the center and the quarterback is supposed to go. That mistake gets compounded even more when the Jags have to back up 5 yards after Byron Leftwich can't call for the snap in time. And unsurprisingly, that drive once again ends in a 3 and out, as on third down, Leftwich gets sacked. The good news for the Jaguars is that after 1 quarter, they're still tied, and their defense, even though they've been bent a few times, has not broken, and has forced 3 stops. The bad news is that you knew this wasn't going to last forever, and on the ensuing drive, that gut feeling is proven correct when Tom Brady hits Troy Brown for an 11-yard touchdown pass. At this point, we are roughly 20 minutes into the game, so we're 1/3 of the way through, and the Jags have yet to pick up a first down with Leftwich under center. While they eventually get a first down on the 4th drive, Leftwich continues to play sloppily. He gets sacked on the first play of the drive, and later in the drive, gets called for another delay of game penalty, pushing them back 5 more yards. Jacksonville once again ends the drive empty-handed, unable to come up with any points. At least on the 5th drive, the Jags finally get on the scoreboard, when Josh Scobie hits a 36-yard field goal, but Leftwich finished the drive missing on 3 of his final 5 passes, including a throw that was nowhere close to Ernest Wilford in the end zone on third down. After the first half, the Jaguars were trailing 7-3. which was a far cry from the 77 points that the Jags put up over the final 2 weeks of the season. Fortunately for the Jags, they get the ball to start the second half. Unfortunately, once again, they fail to do anything, as they stall out at their own 35-yard line, with Leftwich misfiring on his final 3 passes of the drive. And drive number 7, which comes when the Jags are now down 14-3, goes no better, as the Jags go 3 and out, with Leftwich going 1 for 3 on the drive with 1 yard. New England scored another touchdown to make the game appear out of reach and make it 21-3. And then, the floodgates really opened up. If the Jaguars were going to have any chance to win this game and keep their season alive, they needed a big drive from Byron Leftwich here. Instead, they got the exact opposite. With the Jags in Patriot territory, Leftwich got sacked by Willie McGinnis, making it the 3rd time today that he got sacked. And on 4th down, on the very first play of the 4th quarter, Leftwich throws an absolutely atrocious pass to Reggie Williams, which gets picked off easily by Asante Samuel for maybe the easiest pick 6 of his storied career. The Patriots led at 28-3, and Leftwich's nightmare was seemingly getting worse. Through the first 8 drives of the game, Leftwich was 13 for 25, completing just 52% of his passes for 122 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception which happened to be a pick 6, and an abysmal passer rating of 49.1, which was easily the worst of the season. And by this point, the game was over. David Garrard came in for Leftwich in relief 2 drives later, in a move that many fans felt should have come at halftime or at the start of the game. And obviously, in no way am I suggesting, or even coming close to suggesting, that the Jaguars would have won this game if Garrard was the starter over Leftwich. Garrard wasn't great when he came into the game in relief. Granted, the game was over by this point, but Garrard only went 3 for 8 and took 2 sacks himself, meaning that the Patriots finished this game with 6 sacks total. But it was very clear from the very beginning that Jack del Rio's decision to play a rusty Byron Leftwich was not going to work out at all. From the moment the game kicked off, Leftwich did not look comfortable. He was misfiring badly on some easy throws, was taking some unnecessary sacks by virtue of holding onto the ball for too long, and the zip on his throws was not there. And it makes you wonder why the Jaguars didn't go with a hot hand who was winning games, who wasn't injured, who was playing well, and gave the team an extra element in the offense thanks to his mobility. The Leftwich versus Garrard debate was prevalent throughout the entire mid-2000s in Jacksonville, and this was definitely one of the peaks of it. Because to play a guy on the road in the playoffs who had no live action of any kind since breaking his ankle over a month and a half ago, well, that's one of the craziest quarterback controversies in the history of the wildcard round. Get your official Jaguar Gamer 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.